Tonight, the race for the White House veers drastically off course. What comes next now that Joe Biden is dropping out? Plus,
I have full confidence in the men and women of the Secret Service.
the head of the Secret Service on the hot seat as House lawmakers seek answers about the assassination attempt of former president and GOP nominee Donald Trump. And as Israel orders new evacuations in Gaza,
I will seek to anchor the bipartisan support that is so important for Israel.
Prime Minister Netanyahu heads to Washington to meet with President Biden and speak to Congress. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. With just 106 days until the election, Democrats rally around Kamala Harris in the race for the White House. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation from CBN's Washington Bureau. I'm Caitlin Burke. While support is pouring in, Democrats are still scrambling after President Biden's announcement that he's dropping out of the race for the White House. Biden endorsed Vice President Harris to run in his place, and Republicans are already criticizing her record. Meanwhile, the nomination is not hers yet, and she could face competition from within her own party.
I am firsthand witness that every day our President Joe Biden fights for the American people, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for his service to our nation.
In her first public address since Biden's announcement, Vice President Kamala Harris today praising the president's accomplishments without acknowledging his endorsement that she take over as the Democratic nominee.
He has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms.
Democratic leaders across the political spectrum signaling mostly positive reactions to the news of Biden's withdrawal, including California Governor Gavin Newsom, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, and squad member Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, all three also following the president's lead in backing Harris.
Kamala Harris, as our Democratic presidential nominee, is going to bring an X factor.
She's been hitting the campaign trail hard. She's been raising money. I'm confident that she will have the delegates, she will have the resources.
Conspicuously absent so far have been Harris endorsements from Barack and Michelle Obama and Democratic leaders on Capitol Hill, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said Sunday he thinks Harris will be easier to defeat in November's election than Joe Biden. Kamala Harris was California's first female attorney general, making headlines for enacting criminal justice reform before going on to the Senate. RNC spokeswoman Elizabeth Pipko says Harris's record will be a liability.
Look, her record in California is just one of the things that she has to answer for. There's that weak record. There's also the record of this administration, right? The policies they've put forth, which are proving to not be popular with the American people.
Despite apparent widespread support for Harris within the party, Biden's exit sets up the possibility of an open convention to choose his successor as the Democratic nominee. Democrats have until August 7th to get a nominee on the ballot in all 50 states. New York Democratic Congressman Richie Torres warned, quote, anyone musing about a romanticized free-for-all at the Democratic National Convention is living in a dangerous fantasy land and is asking for a continuation of the chaos and confusion that has consumed Washington, D.C. Major questions remain for Harris, who says she'll earn the nomination, and is reportedly already talking to potential vice presidential candidates. The DNC Rules Committee meets Wednesday to implement a framework to select a new nominee. President Biden says he'll address the nation this week to further explain his decision. And with that, let's bring in Faith Nation contributor and the editor and publisher of Inside Elections, Nathan Gonzalez, as well as Justin Giboney, president and executive director of the AND campaign. Thank you both for being with us. Justin, let's start with you. We've seen Democrats rallying behind the vice president, but is there still a chance someone else could challenge her in an open convention?
There's a small chance. I don't expect that'll happen. You may have someone like Dean Phillips try to come in. Joe Manchin mentioned that he would try, but then kind of backed out of it. So I don't expect that. I think technically there may be a process, but the way that this is coming out, especially with Pelosi just endorsing her, there won't be much of a real process. I think Democrats are all getting behind Kamala Harris.
That's definitely how it seems. Now, Nathan, Biden was trailing behind Trump for months. How does Harris poll against the former president?
Well, initially, I mean, she polls maybe a couple of points better than Biden, but this is a game changer because it completely changes the conversation. Ever since the debate, we were talking about Biden's age. Biden's age. Is he old enough? Is he young? Can he do it? And this changes the equation. There's still going to be some talk about the president, but now it's a new matchup. And Republicans are going to try to hold the vice president responsible for all the things they don't like about the administration. But this is going to allow a broader conversation about the matchup between Harris and Trump and about what Trump has done or is going to do in the future. It has energized the Democratic base, and now I think the fight is going to be over independent voters. And if for those voters who said that both candidates were too old, Democrats are offering an alternative. For people who didn't like, oh, it's the same matchup as 2020. Democrats are offering an alternative. And so this is, well, I think it's going to take a couple weeks to see how this changed it, but this just changing the narrative is what Democrats needed at the beginning.
Sticking with that kind of strategy change, we have heard these attacks about Biden's age, but now President Trump is the oldest candidate in the race. He's 78 years old. For both of you, what do you think the strategy will be against Harris? How do we think Trump will attack her?
Well, I think for one, they'll try to tie her to what they see as the failures of the administration that she was part of. And so a lot of the attacks, especially policy attacks that were used against Biden, similarly might be used against her. I think even when she ran, she made some statements that I think they'll try to pull back, whether it be her stances with Black Lives Matter, things of that nature. I think they'll try to show her as someone who's not quite ready and someone who was tied to some failures that they've been talking about for a while.
Right. Harris did spend most of her life as a prosecutor before entering politics. What are the chances, Nathan, that we see her lean into the narrative that a veteran prosecutor is now taking on a convicted felon in the battle for the White House?
I think they're going to lean into it. I think Democrats like that matchup, and they're going to use it as an opportunity to highlight the legal trouble that the former president has been in. And I know those cases have either resolved or not resolved or pushed aside, but it doesn't change that fundamentally. And so, Harris is not the perfect candidate, but we have to remember that since the debate, Trump had a distinct advantage in the race. I think he has a distinct advantage now, but this is at least an opportunity for Democrats to have it be different. And we're going to be talking about the same upper Midwest states, and we could talk about running mates and how that might impact things. But there's a new energy around Democrats that is maybe close to what we saw in Milwaukee. I was at the convention. Republicans were unified, energized. They were feeling good. And this throws a little bit of a wrench into that conversation.
We are going to talk about running mates. But first, Justin, anything to add there?
No, I think Nathan has a very good point. There's a renewed energy among Democrats. You have a new candidate who doesn't suffer from some of the same ailments, so to speak. And even if you talk about the African-American professional class and political class and parts of the base, you can tell that people are excited. People are getting out, sororities and fraternities coming together saying, we're going to push this through. And so I think it is a more formidable opponent than they had in Biden. Maybe not by much, but I think time will tell. Also, this gives a chance for Kamala to reestablish herself and come out and kind of run on her profile and let that wave take her where it can.
All right. Any input from either of you on who could have the best chance of being selected as Harris's running mate, and what's on the line here when it comes to her choice?
I think this is going to be a big decision. This is going to be a big decision because it's going to be her first major decision that everyone's going to focus on. There are kind of four main people talked about right now. Three governors, Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Interesting enough, they've all been state attorneys general in the past, as was Kamala Harris before the Senate and before becoming vice president. I think all of those are sort of safe picks, or maybe picks that you make in order to not lose. But I think that Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona is the one that it would show that Democrats are in this to win it. He is a former astronaut, a Navy pilot. He's also married to Gabby Giffords, who was shot at a constituent event in 2011 in Tucson. One of the Democrats' best fundraisers. I think that is he has the ability to reach a national audience, right? His resume or profile might cause people outside of Arizona to say, oh, okay, I'll pay attention. I'll listen to what he has to say. Whereas the other candidates would be fine. I don't think Democrats would lose because of them, but I don't know that they're going to have a national profile.
Justin, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I would say I would push back a little bit. I think what Nathan says is right about that candidate. However, he's in the Senate, and so that could cause a problem for Democrats in the Senate if they pull him out. I don't think he's out of the running, but I think a Bashir may make a little more sense. But Kelly is right in there. He's on the short list, and we'll see what happens. I think that Senate component might make a difference, though, there.
All right, Justin, as we wrap things up, what role do Christian leaders have during such unprecedented times?
I think number one has to be perspective and sobriety. This is a dark moment for us right now after an attempted assassination, all this polarization. And more than pushing any particular candidate, we need to make sure that people are ready to coexist after the election, make sure people have hope and are aspirational after this is all over, whether they win or lose. And so that's what I think. Talk about the principles. You can mention that, you mention what's going on, but make sure that people can coexist and be hopeful after all of this is over.
So important, and such great insights from both of you. Justin, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Coming up, the head of the Secret Service grilled on Capitol Hill, the failures that led to Trump's assassination attempt, when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. 3 investigations are now underway into the Secret Service following last Saturday's assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The agency's director testified today on Capitol Hill as calls mount for her resignation. Senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener is here with us now. Tara, Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle called this the worst blunder in decades. Did she take any accountability for it?
You know, she kind of was a little bit back and forth on that. On the one hand, saying that it was her responsibility, but couldn't quite say where the buck stopped during today's hearings. In any case, as you said, there are growing calls for her resignation.
Our mission is not political. It is literally a matter of life and death.
In her first public appearance since the rally, Secret Service Director Cheadle promised to move heaven and earth to ensure what happened July 13th will never happen again.
I have full confidence in the men and women of the Secret Service. They are worthy of our support in executing our protective mission.
Cheadle is facing multiple calls from Republicans and at least one Democrat to quit, given the events and failures of that day.
We almost lost a presidential candidate the other day.
Committee Chairman James Comer praising efforts by Secret Service agents while questioning Cheadle's leadership.
While we give overwhelming thanks to the individual Secret Service agents who did their jobs under immense pressure, this tragedy was preventable.
While Cheadle insists agents would not have allowed Trump to take the stage if they knew of a legitimate threat, critics point to media reports and video footage showing that Secret Service, law enforcement, and even rally-goers knew of the threat at least 20 minutes before shots rang out.
Now, the rally was not paused at that point, correct?
No.
And she was asked why Secret Service didn't put personnel on the roof of the building the gunman occupied.
I mean, you could have put Barney Fife on the roof and kept somebody from getting up there.
Cheadle was also asked about the 1-minute delay in removing Trump from the stage after he was hit by a bullet. Matthew Crooks fired 8 shots before a Secret Service sniper killed him with a single bullet. In a heated exchange with House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan, Cheadle insisted past requests for additional security by Trump's campaign were not denied.
Well, is Mr. Guglielmi your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
And Republican and Democratic leaders of the House Oversight Committee, Representatives James Comer and Jamie Raskin, say they will send an official letter calling for Kimberly Cheadle's resignation. Caitlin, tough day for her on Capitol Hill.
For more analysis, we're joined now by former Secret Service agent Tim Miller. Tim, first question. Director Cheadle says the agency will move heaven and earth to ensure an incident like the July 13th assassination attempt does not happen again. What does that mean for the agency? What work needs to be done to make that assurance?
Well, first off, I would have hoped the agency would have moved heaven and earth to ensure protectees were safe all along. So not quite sure what this is referring to, because it is very obvious that what occurred last Saturday was not moving heaven and earth, but it was the bare minimal. And so I think what you're going to hear at the hearing today is a litany of things that kind of violated principles and practices that we've been utilizing with the Secret Service for decades. My hope and prayer is that it starts, if you're going to move heaven and earth, it starts with the leadership. How did the Secret Service get to this point? I would remind you, it was only 3 or 4 short weeks ago that you had 37 or so internal Secret Service agents become whistleblowers saying, hey, our mission is being compromised. And yet no substantial changes came as a result of that. And sure enough, what they were saying came out to be true during the attempted assassination of President Trump.
When it comes to leadership, what's the appropriate amount of accountability here? Is it resignations? Is it system reform? Your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, Director Cheadle said the buck stops with her, but that means that the accountability starts with her. As a Marine, we learned very early on, if the mission fails, it's a direct responsibility of the leader. And in that case, military officers were fully expected. If you're the captain of the ship runs aground, you don't even have to be on the bridge. If the buck stops with you, that means you're fired right away, so that we can look objectively from the top down at what happened and why it happened. I think Director Cheadle should step down, but there are other leaders within the Secret Service that allowed this to happen. And that's just simply so there's accountability with the American people. We are tired of hearing excuses for why things were the way they are without the opportunity to correct them.
What message does this entire situation send to the world or people here in the U.S. with ill intent about the safety of the American president?
Well, I mean, that's the ultimate question. And I think certainly if you look at the lax security in place at the site with former President Trump, you realize it was not even remotely a safe security operational area. Now, with that said, let me say this. The men and women of the Secret Service are incredible. They're gifted, they're strong, they're talented. But unfortunately, and there are reports that the First Lady had far more Secret Service resources a short distance away than the projected, obviously the Republican nominee, but also the potential next president of the United States and former had at his site. Well, you have to ask yourself, why were those resources pulled from his site where there is such a high level of threat information and given to other requirements? It just doesn't make sense. And I think the details today will bring home clearly kind of why. At least that's my hope.
All right. Tim Miller, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, while war rages in Gaza, Prime Minister Netanyahu makes a crucial visit to the United States. Faith Nation returns right after this. Welcome back. Israel is ordering Palestinians to evacuate a designated safe zone in southern Gaza as airstrikes on Hamas intensify. The military says terrorists have embedded themselves around the neighborhood of Khan Yunis. The Hamas-run health ministry claiming dozens have been killed so far in the Israeli strikes, including several women and children. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is traveling to Washington today. He's set to meet with President Biden and Vice President Harris tomorrow and speak to a joint session of Congress Wednesday. Netanyahu recently sharing one of his main goals for the visit.
I will seek to anchor the bipartisan support that is so important for Israel. And I will tell my friends on both sides of the aisle that regardless who the American people choose as their next president, Israel remains America's indispensable and strong ally in the Middle East.
The Prime Minister's trip comes amid news of the deaths of 2 Israeli hostages in Hamas captivity. The terror group is still holding their bodies, and about 120 hostages remain in Gaza. Israeli authorities believe about a third of them are dead. Even so, talks to negotiate their release and a ceasefire are expected to resume later this week. Turning now to simmering tensions between China and Taiwan, the island territory is carrying out drills to simulate a potential invasion from China. The annual exercise includes fighter jets, helicopters, and planes. Taiwan split from China during a civil war in 1949, but Beijing considers the island to be part of its own territory. And while the military prepares for war, so are ordinary civilians. As CBN News previously reported, the constant threats from Beijing have prompted some Taiwanese to take up arms and learn how to defend themselves if a conflict breaks out. The U.S. has vowed to defend Taiwan against Beijing and supports the island with defense funding. Coming up, some unexpected social media inspiration for learning sign language. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, learning an impressive new skill has one dog reaching social media stardom. Derek and his 9-year-old corgi named Eowyn recently started sharing a TikTok video showing how the pup picked up on American Sign Language. Derek's wife Emily is deaf, and before they got married, Derek began training the dog through hand signals. Once Emily officially joined the family, they began exclusively communicating with ASL, including Eowyn. She learned the signs for her favorite words like ball, cookie, and car, and her least favorite words like bath. Through social media, they hope to inspire others to learn ASL too. That is going to do it for Faith Nation tonight. We will see you tomorrow.